I don't think it's a question of relaxation of norms. I think it's more an ease of doing business for certain selected sectors in the case of the 60-day norm, and in the case of the beneficial ownership definition, that is greater clarity being provided so that it's clear as to how investors are to be dealt with. Previously, we've had certain issues where there's an investor from a country which is a permissible investor in India, which would normally be on an automatic route, but where an entity from a land border country has a small shareholding. A small shareholding maybe with somebody who is from one of the land border countries. So the question is it to be treated as a company from one of the LBCs, or is it to be treated as a company from the parent location? So just to make sure that there is clarity on that aspect, the same definition which is used in the PMLA legislation is being used here, which is if up to 10% there is shareholding by an entity from a land border country, then in an investor company which is registered elsewhere, which is not from one of the LBCs, then in those cases it will not be treated as a company from an LBC. So that clarity has been provided so that it's easier to deal with these cases. So that I don't think is really a relaxation as such. It's a clarification providing an indication as to what would be treated as beneficial ownership for the purpose of an investor company which is not registered in LBC. So that is one point. The second aspect, I think, is what the government has attempted to do is identify 3 specific sectors where we require investment, where the presence of companies from land border countries is important enough in the sector, where we have to do business with them in order to go forward, in order to develop those sectors within India. One of those is electronics, and as you're aware, even under the regular PN3 mechanism, a significant number of companies or significant number of investments which have been cleared are by companies are in the electronics sector, even under the existing PN3. So in recognizing that this is a segment which is important for investment, what is being done is simplifying the entire process and placing a time limit for the approval.
Right.
So, which means that we are recognizing, what we are basically saying is we are recognizing that investment in the electronics sector is important, and even if there is a company from an investor from a LBC which wants to invest in this particular segment, that would be a fast-tracked clearance. But it has to go through the PN3 process in terms of getting clearance from the various relevant ministries. So that is the only change. So I would say that while there is a fast tracking in the case of electronics, which we believe is important and which will support the investment program in this particular sector, and in a sense it speeds up because a significant number of cases have been cleared in this sector previously, it speeds up the process.
Right, sir, but what are the kind of investments that you're hoping to sort of achieve with respect to, these sort of change norms? Because, a large composition of that seems to be coming for the electronics segment, which is done rather well.
You see, I think primarily we are looking at, as you know, we are looking at deepening the value chain in India, which means that we are looking at investments in electronic component manufacturing entities who will come in. Based on the success of the PLI 1.0 for mobile phones and otherwise, fundamentally we now have scale in the electronic sector, which means that the situation is ripe for more of the upstream supply chain companies to come in. And the idea is to enable more of the supply chain to come into the country.
Right, and that is also the intent behind the ECMS scheme as well. But let me ask you, what happens to the existing applications that came in before these rules were announced, before these norms were announced? Will these companies need to file a fresh set of applications, or will they?
I presume not. That is something which DPIIT will have to deal with. But I presume, since the idea is to simplify things, we should be able to take those same applications and move forward with them.
Okay. So let me also ask you, about other matters related to the, in the ministry that you essentially are handling, and this is with respect to the 3-hour window for companies to sort of take down objectionable content, right? I mean, the government's intent is essentially to make sure that deepfakes do not travel, misinformation doesn't travel. What's been the response from the industry? Because, there are some companies like Meta, for instance, they've come on record and stated that it is difficult to sort of, comply with this timeline.
My understanding is a little different.
Okay.
Because they have been able in the past to actually comply fairly quickly. And, we've had takedown requests with which many other companies have complied within an hour and so on, when, the issues are of that nature. There may be some specifics in terms of, screening certain kinds of content, especially AI-related content, because there are some restricted categories there to see whether you can do it within that time period. But I'm sure technologically it should be possible for them to comply, and we've had discussions with them, and they've been told that they have shown compliance in the past on this aspect, and that is not something which has worried them all that much.
Okay.
There could be some, minor issues there. I think fundamentally they do tell us that they intend to be in compliance, and they are putting in place measures to comply.
Right. So about the restriction of social media, or usage of social media for kids, for children, that is something that, Minister Ashwini Vaishnav also spoke about during the AI summit. The French president also spoke about his intent behind that move. Where are things moving as far as that particular aspect is concerned?
I think there's a debate through various fora. Many people are speaking about it. We are taking note of all these views. Eventually, the government will act on the basis of what the political consensus is on something like this.
So just one final question, and this is essentially on the India Semiconductor Mission Part 2. What are the timelines? If you could share the timelines that you're working with as far as that is concerned, because there is a lot of interest. We've also been given to understand that, various companies from, Japan and Southeast Asia have sort of expressed the intent to sort of invest in India as far as semiconductor ecosystem is concerned.
I think we are in the process of interministerial consultation, so it would not be fair on me to place a specific timeline on that. But in the government system, once it's announced in the budget, then it means that we are always under pressure to get it done as quickly as possible, and that's exactly how we are working towards.